Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next Tech Roundtable here from Wonderment Apps. We're excited to have our awesome tech managers as a part of this conversation today. And we will be talking today about like how to choose the right tech stack for your project, and thinking about what kind of technical foundation you need to work on a project that you might be building or planning out, or if you're a tech person working with the team, how to think about most effectively recommending the right kind of tech stack for them to work with, depending on the nature of the project. One of the things that we find working on lots and lots of different projects is that there's different technologies that are best suited for different challenges and different ways of creating great products out there. So today we're going to look at some of the areas in that, and we're going to talk to our team and get their feedback as they think about when they have to make these recommendations to clients, or they have to make these recommendations on projects as to what the best technology is to use. What are some of the areas they're considering? So let's do a very quick introduction of our team. For those of you who joined last time, you might remember them. And for those of you that are new, we're glad to have you here. So let's go ahead and start with Faraz, our co-founder and CTO.
Hi, my name is Faraz Tabibian. I'm one of the co-founders and partners at Wonderment Apps. I have years of experience building and architecting technology solutions in many different verticals, such as e-commerce, entertainment, and SaaS businesses. And I'm happy to be here today.
Awesome, thanks, Faraz. And Meenakshi.
Hi everyone, my name is Meenakshi Rawat. I have been working with Wonderment Apps from almost 5 years. In these 5 years, we have worked, we have developed, we have managed number of small to large scale applications. In our company, we just would love to have work with new technologies every day. We just don't hide to find new technology for any project.
Thank you. Timothy?
Hi, my name is Timothy Nazar, and I'm leading 2 teams and in the mobile development and web-based development. So I'm happy to meet you today.
Thanks, Timothy. And Sergey.
Hi everyone, my name is Sergey Schwab. I'm head of QA department, and same as Meenakshi, I'm working with Wonderment Apps more than 5 years already. And I'm managing QA team here, and I'm glad to present on this roundtable.
Awesome, great, thank you. It's great to have all of you, and we're excited to run through some of these questions with you and learn a little bit about how to pick the right tech stack for a project. So I wanted to start today by thinking a little bit about the kind of like higher level aspects of looking at these questions, and we'll dive deeper into some of the kind of core subject areas around it. But really at a high level, I wanted to talk a little bit about thinking about the cost of development and how to look at the infrastructure, and really assessing things from a bird's eye view. So for us, let's start in this area and talk a little bit about how we kind of look at some of the aspects of cost of development. Maybe we'll start talking about like the average cost of like talent and resourcing. Like maybe that's a good spot to start discussing.
Sure, thank you, Ryan. So choosing the right tech stack for your project is a hard topic. You know, if you asked me this question 10 years ago, Ryan, it would have been so much easier to answer. But with the number of available technologies, cloud infrastructures, the backend technologies, front-end technologies, it's really difficult, you know, these days to actually get this right. So, you know, there are many different factors that we usually look at when choosing the right tech stack for a project that you're trying to build. And one of the main factors that people always care about is cost. You know, how much is it going to cost me to build this application? And in order to answer that question, you know, we usually look at 4 or 5 different factors. The first one, as Ryan said, is average cost of talent and resources. So resource cost can be very different from one tech stack to another. A great example of this is Python. Like Python developers are just massively more expensive than traditional .NET and Java resources. So really think about, like what tech stack you're going with and how much that tech stack is going to cost you on average when finding talents and resources.
Why, real quick, why is there such a cost difference between developer types? Like what is a reason for that?
Yeah, it usually comes down to learning curve, Ryan. So the learning curve for Python is it takes more hours for someone to get more comfortable in a platform like Python versus .NET, and also like frameworks like .NET or Java. They come with more. There is more available ready to go components in those frameworks versus something like Python. So it just it takes a lot longer for someone in Python to get up to speed and become a senior developer versus something like .NET or Java.
Got it. Thank you. And like, but they really all have like an underlying architecture, right? They look at that they have to that you kind of have to consider some of the cost of the architecture, correct?
Correct. So yeah, like architecture is always and like one of the main factors too. Some tech stacks are really hard to scale, and because they don't really come up with the structure that you need, and you have to go reinvent the wheel in some of these tech stacks. For example, if you're trying to build a scalable application using Node.js, it's really difficult. It's really difficult to scale Node.js, and as a result of that, your cost of architecture could be massively higher than some of the traditional frameworks. So definitely, like I would look at the cost of architecture day one and making sure that I'm choosing the tech stack that doesn't have exponential and massive architecture cost against it.
And so some of those kind of traditional tech stacks, and I mean a variety, they have licensing fees associated to them as well, right? So it's not as simple as just how much it costs to develop, because not everything is open source, right? So how do the licensing fees play into this?
Right. So yeah, like some licenses can be really expensive. Like a great example of this is you're trying to build a relational database, and you're like, okay, Microsoft SQL Server seems to be a great option, right? And so many tools available on it, and like you can easily host that on AWS RDS, and your first month AWS bill comes, and like you're caught off guard. So it's mainly because the licensing fee of Microsoft SQL Server is it's just so much higher than other relational databases. So in those scenarios, I would definitely look at like comparing it to other relational databases systems such as Postgres or other ones, and just make that comparison day one before you choose the right tech stack for your project.
Yeah, and you mentioned thinking about the hosting aspects of it as well. So it's not just about the licensing of the hosting, but like really thinking about the total cost of the hosting environment, correct? What are some of those pieces that we're thinking about in there?
Right. I mean, as you mentioned, like cloud infrastructures and hosting environments today, there's so many options available. There is AWS, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud, and many more. So it's really important to do that comparison before choosing the right infrastructure for your application. Like if you're looking for storage systems, you have videos or images or other content types, like make that comparison and see like what bandwidth you need, how much storage you need, and how much it's going to cost you, on each of the cloud infrastructures, and make the comparison really early on.
Yeah, and there's people who work with these hosting environments. There's some formulas they can use that give you a relative accurate projection of roughly what you think, but you also have to look at kind of the usage and the overall traffic on the website and things like that as well, right?
Exactly. So traffic and bandwidth, and basically the volume of your storage. These are the three parameters that you have to plug into those formulas before you can get the cost out.
Awesome. Thanks. I want to talk about another one and that we were thinking about a little bit as well when we're trying to pick the right tech stack for our project. Kind of in line with some of the hosting, but a little bit different, maybe more on the development side, and thinking about if your technology and product can actually scale. So we're thinking about like scale and performance of the actual product. And Meenakshi, maybe I'll have you dig into this a little bit with me. So how would you tell us a little bit about how you think about scale and performance as we talk about the right tech stack?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and the most important thing which we should consider while designing or while building a new application. So generally, when we start working on an application, it might not be that big, right? Someone is asking us to build an application, they have few thoughts, but they are not very aware that exactly how much today it might be a small, but they have some bigger plans coming up in 6 months or coming in 1 year. So these applications might grow to an extent that today we decide an architecture, if it is not scalable, right? If it is not such a way designed, or it is the way infrastructure we have chosen, that it's not easy either to scale it, either horizontal scaling where the kind of, if there's a lot of features as added, or the vertical scaling where the number of users are increasing day by day, or we are trying to get the same application available to different devices or different these kind of things. So in that case, we have to be very much aware that what we are building, what it will look like in some other coming months, and depending on that, we have to look at our kind of tech stack. And the tech stack, it not only our hosting infrastructure, but all the kind of the languages, kind of frameworks which we are using. And one other example where we have been facing very commonly is like the way dynamically trends are changing in the world. Today something is required and tomorrow something else is required. So it's become very very difficult that to project something, and then it is changing overnight. Then how do we scale our application as per those requirements? How do we change? And similarly, the tomorrow our client decides to host this application in new countries. Then how do we measure the performance, and how do we make sure that the performance level will be same?
So what I hear is like not kind of thinking about this one specific moment that we're building it, but really thinking about flexibly where it's planned to go. And
yes.
And if you don't think about that, you might miss things like expanding based on device, expanding based on region, or
right.
just like traffic and audience growing. So it seems to me like a phased approach kind of makes sense, right? So you're thinking about an early stage phase and maybe later. How does some of that play into it?
Yes. So it's very important that we, connect with our client, connect with their thoughts, what their projections are for this application. And once we have once we understand all those aspects, then only we come up with the right tech stack.
And awesome. And what if you, when you start, you have a different budget than you might later? I mean, how do you think about the amount of money you have right now versus later, and how do you suggest planning for that?
Yeah. So generally, when we start, there's a limited budget, or when we are developing, there's a kind of budget which is allocated. But once an application is built, it's always, generally our clients say, no, we don't have that kind of budget, but we want to still fit in a lot of features, right? So depending on that, the kind of budget we have to think what kind of resources we have, right? Depending on those resources and the kind of tech stack which we are, using. So we might think on the first step, or these are the things, if these kind of features or these kind of scalability that will be required in the future. So you choose a right stack which will require less development of effort, or less in hosting effort, and can be scaled easily.
Great, thank you. I appreciate it. One of the other areas I wanted to talk a little bit about is that process of thinking about these things before we go into a project. So, you know, when we start a project, we might know that the expectation based on marketing needs or based on like sales teams, things like that, they may cause it to expand in the future. So really thinking through what the scope and requirements are in the moment, but also thinking about what they might be in the future affects the moment, kind of like we were talking about. So Timothy, maybe you could take this one. Like what do you think about like around scope and requirements, and maybe thinking about how to start small versus jumping right into something big?
Yeah, so I have an apples in front of me, and it reminded me an example of that. If I want to slice one apple, I need one simple knife, right? And if I want to do the hundreds or thousands of apples a day, I need a professional machine for that. And similarly in the text, so if I would need to build a simple one landing page, maybe a pure JavaScript will be enough for that, right? And I don't need to spin up the whole Angular framework with the routing, with the authentication, and all of that different component structure, and all of that thing, which takes a few days to even establish or set up to come up. So analyzing the requirements and thinking about whether will need that to be enhanced. Is that a single landing page? Will it suit just this particular purpose, and then it will be removed because let's say the promotion campaign is over? So why should I keep it? I'll get rid of that and then start over. Versus having something that I'm planning to build a like big CRM system with a lot of potential features, enhancements that we already defined. In this way, of course, I need a robust, mature framework which will allow my team to be efficient and collaborate effectively going forward.
Right. Yeah. And it makes sense. And it helps you also kind of pinpoint which part of the application or which part of the product actually needs kind of the most engineering focus, right? How do we consider that when we're scoping?
Yeah, so let's imagine the video service like YouTube, right? There is a lot of different parts of logic there. You have a login screen, you have like categories and all of that stuff, but ultimately the most complex thing behind the scenes is how the videos are being processed and then optimized for different audiences and then distributed, right? So rather than spending a lot of time on this, like things that is like relatively simple, we would plan most of the efforts to properly design and architect and choose the right stack that will allow us to do this efficiently and cheap without reinventing the wheel. So
Right.
maybe we can leverage something that's already on the market.
Right. Something that's already on the market, thinking about some of those third-party tools, correct? Like what can we actually not build from scratch? That's a part of that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Great. And like how do you start and think about like something that is potentially a really robust piece of technology? Do you start at like the architectural level? Like what like how do you dive into something of this scale?
Well, of course, you can take a look at who is behind this technology, right? So it's a major factor. For instance, .NET and C# is supported by Microsoft. Like Swift is supported by Apple. So, and they are holders or owners of the distribution platforms. So it definitely will be kept there for a time being. So analyzing who is behind the technology, how much years they are on the market, right? How much questions are posted to Stack Overflow related to that technology. That's also a good indicator of whether the technology is alive, whether the community is alive and supportive, because it's like at the end of the day, a lot of developers will go there and look for for solutions, so that they should be there in place.
Great.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, another part of the overall development or creation process of a piece of technology is comes after the actual building part of it, and is actually doing the review and looking at quality assurance processes and thinking about how we make sure what we build functions correctly. Sergey, maybe you could talk a little bit about when we're trying to choose the right piece for how the right technology to use for quality assurance testing and making sure it's the right pick. Can you tell us a little bit about how we think about the cost of testing and how we think about which tools are right?
Yeah, Ryan, thanks for this question. So, of course, question is a really important part of the whole cost of any project. And have you ever wondered how much software testing costs for any average tech company? And I've already reviewed it long ago, and according to different open sources, the total annual spend on testing for in global variant exceeds $300 billion. And usually software testing takes up to 25 or up to 40% of total budget for any IT project. And of course, when we are receiving requirements for any project, we should definitely think about testing strategy. And based on budget which we have, for example, for this project, we should think about what types of testing, for example, we can implement for this project. We should discuss and think about right balance, for example, between automation testing and manual testing. And of course, measuring of the cost of testing for any project is really important before justifying any testing initiatives.
Right. I have a question for you. So I know when we're thinking about the right stack to use, one of the things is like for quality assurance, which tools are most effective. So we have what are some examples of some manual testing tools that that you guys might think about?
Yeah, it completely depends on exact project that we should use, for example, these tools. But of course, we should definitely think about test management tools. For example, we pretty often using TestRail. Also, there are a lot of different analogs of such tools, but we should definitely think about all advantages that they can give. For example, integration with Jira and some other tools. And as for me, it is one of the best that we can use for any types of testing and for manual too.
So TestRail is the one that I know we primarily use here. On the automated side, there's a lot of different scripting tools to be handled. What are some of the ones that we think about? Regarding
automation, for example, if there are any projects where we should definitely involve automation testing, we should think about by which technology goals of testing for this project can be achieved in the most easiest maybe way and with maintaining the best quality for this. Of course, we have a lot of different tools for desktop, for automation of desktop test cases or mobile test cases. And here we should definitely use the right combination of such tools. For example, we can use JavaScript with some additional tools like Appium for mobile testing and for mobile testing support. But anyway, we should always think about goals for this project, and we should use the most efficient and up-to-date tools because they provide much better, for example, support and efficiency.
Okay, great. Thank you. For us, coming back to you, I think we think a lot about there's a lot of pieces in this, right? So there's a lot of like areas within the whole life of a project that you have to think about which tools and picking the right tech stack for product functionality, things like that. So it really is kind of a big picture to think about. How do we also look at kind of the big picture in terms of thinking about project timelines and like actually getting somebody from beginning to end on a project?
Yeah. So Ryan, like, I mean, as we know, every tech project has a timeline and a deadline, and it usually comes down to three important factors. So cost of development, quality of development, and the speed of development. You're always up against, these three factors. So like usually the question that we ask, the client or ourselves is, what needs to get sacrificed, in order to make a deadline. So and it's not easy. It's not easy to get it right. And usually the way that we look at it is that, okay, so what part of a system needs to be engineered right? And what part of the system can be revisited later at a later time? So for example, if you're building a video streaming application, it makes more sense for you to maybe build the video streaming part of it right and engineer that right day one. And maybe revisit the rest of the application later, so that you make it to the deadline, and then you can revisit the rest of the application. So really, like, thinking about what part of the application needs to be is going to be up against some traffic, and you have some scale against that part of the application. So you pay attention to those pieces first, because you have scale and you have traffic against those components, and the other pieces can be always revisited later, and you can always, there is always tech debt. There is always refactoring that needs to happen as part of any technology project. But making sure that you're sacrificing the right things when you are up against a deadline.
So the actual deadline itself can influence like what technologies you want to structure into this, because, and I have an interesting question related to this. A lot of times startups will think that they want to go with a particular tech stack, and a lot of the purpose of that is, I mean, there's different reasons for it, but one of them might be like speed to market, or making sure that there's a budget limitation that's hit, and then later you find out, like, once you start getting traction, that you can't stay with that technology, right?
Exactly. So yeah. As I said, with startups, this is very common that, they pick a technology, they pick a tech stack because they have available bandwidth, they have available resources, or one piece of technology, feels comfortable to them. And then later on, a year, 2 years later, they're like, oh, wow, like, you're up against some serious traffic, and like continuing with this tech stack is going to be really difficult. So it's very common, and, they pick one tech stack, and then 2 years down the line, they have to switch over or switch off of it. And it happens with like big companies like Facebook and Microsoft, and like even them, they like, Facebook has re-engineered, their API layers, like 4 or 5 times throughout the course of time, because they keep receiving new requirements with traffic. So it's very common. And as I said, it comes down to cost of development, quality of development, and speed of development. And, looking at these three factors, you basically do your best to choose the best tech stack at the time. But 5 years later, there could be better technologies available. And this is just the game that we are in technology, that there's always better technologies available at a later time.
I talked a little bit about this earlier when we were talking about the cost of resources, but there's this other interesting factor when selecting a tech stack, which is how many available resources are there for that particular stack of technology, right? Because you might find, like, if you take like the Microsoft stack, there's a pretty robust set of developers that are out there, so it gives you the ability to find more developers, versus picking like a newer technology which less people know, and you might have somebody who has become an expert in it. How important is the availability of resources in choosing a tech stack? If you're thinking about the big picture of it.
Mm-hmm.
Can I jump in for a second? Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. So it's like the rule of thumb is that you always go with what you know. And that's what I always recommend to all the companies that look like if one tech stack feels comfortable to you, like try to utilize that tech stack as much as possible, because you have a lot of domain knowledge in your company in that tech stack. Your managers know that tech stack really well. Your resources know that tech stack. And if all of a sudden you're like, if a new piece of technology looks hot to you and you're like, oh no, I definitely want to use, like, just be aware that you're going to pay a lot of like big costs for just domain knowledge and the cost of functional management. So like going with what you know and looking at what bandwidth you have available in like on the bench for the tech stack that you go with is definitely a huge factor.
Yeah, and like the total available resources in your region for that technology, right? Because there may be a limited amount of people who actually develop on it as well. So if you have to change people out, it can be a problem.
Exactly, and then as you said, every region can be specialized in one tech stack, and working in this industry for a long time, we kind of know the secret sauces and the formulas that okay, this region like knows this piece of technology really well, and this region is good at mobile development versus this region is really good at like automation QA. So picking the right region for the right technology is also extremely important.
Yeah, Timothy, I think you wanted to comment on this really quick as well, correct?
Yeah, I generally agree with what Faraz saying, because like usually technology provides you with a lot of capabilities, and usually if you know the right thing to use from that technology, you basically can do a lot more than you can imagine. But like some technologies just are more suitable for that for particular reasons. So meaning that if we have really well-rounded engineers on that one particular technology, and they can pull everything, even if it's a technology like maybe simple JavaScript, right, versus like some strongly typed language with a lot of constraints. If the engineer was doing things in this technology for years, he might come up with a solution in days versus engineering something complex in weeks or months.
Great, thank you. And actually, I was wondering also around security and thinking about like how we pick the right kind of security technology solutions. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about that as we're thinking about the right tech stacks.
So as we all aware, like security, privacy is very much needed across all the applications. It's something an end user is looking for. Whenever they are coming on an application, they want to make sure whatever they are doing is secure. The information they are giving is private. It cannot be, it's not going into wrong hands. So it's become very important that what is the application which we are building on, what kind of security we need. What are the data which we are getting from the user? What are the sensitive data which we are collecting? So are we capable enough, our tech stack is capable enough to get that data secured? So depending on that, so it's not only the tech stack, the way we are designing our architecture. So it becomes very important what kind of architecture we are designing, or is that architecture possible in the kind of tech stack we are expecting. So that makes one reason that what tech stack we are using, is this are these security features we will be able to achieve or not. And the second is our tech stack for the infrastructure becomes very important, that to which level security we will be requiring. So what are the infrastructure, the way we are designing our infrastructure will have that security completely locked up, that no one is able to clear our privacy or something.
Yeah, so when thinking about working with like a product manager or like an entrepreneur or somebody like that, making sure that you understand like the level of security that's got to happen in the end product or in the application supporting the product, right? In those layers. And so I know an application layer is really important, and also how do you think about like protecting the overall infrastructure and thinking about those kind of security decisions.
Sorry, Ryan, can you repeat? I did not hear.
How do you think about protecting the overall infrastructure and kind of some of the security decisions in the tech stack there?
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. So there are a lot of aspects of security. One is the content security, how we are securing our users' content. Then there's like of our asset security, the things which we are storing, are they secured on it? What is the data which we are exposing to the users? Is the right information? So there, first of all, again, so when it comes to what kind of application it is. So if it is like kind of where we have some kind of e-commerce site where the user can purchase and is giving us our credit card information or these kind of information, the security is the first thing which comes in our mind. So in those cases, we are sure that what kind of authentication, authorization techniques we are using. Are we using some standard built-in services, or are we designing our own services? Are they good enough to hold services? How we are hosting our data? When we are hosting our data on the cloud server, are we managing the user accesses, the permissions in the right way that they are not exposed to anyone? And the very much one feature which we are using, across everywhere we are trying to achieve is the MFA enabling multiple factor authentication, that everyone who is accessing a sensitive information has two-step or some kind of multi-factor authentication enabled. So there comes a lot of aspects into that.
And I want to add one more sentence regarding the like integration. So I think when you, because the security question is so complex and in different aspects, you might more and more companies starting to leverage tools like Okta. Those solutions allow you to quickly integrate into, no matter what technology stack, they have a plugins or SDKs for different technology stacks. So, but if you want to go with something cheaper, less maybe popular, you want to ensure that this like security solution has a right SDKs for your tech stack, and it will also like affect the decisions.
Great, thank you. Yeah, last question on this particular subject. Maybe Sergey, do we also need to think about testing certain secondary aspects of the system, like security or elements that are not like just in the product itself? Correct. These are other considerations for testing.
Yes, definitely, Ryan. As I already mentioned, when we are preparing test strategy for any project, we should definitely think about different types of projects. And it should be definitely including security testing. And there are a lot of different aspects which can be done from manual perspective and from automation side. And this is one of the most important features, not features maybe, or parts of testing strategy that should be definitely well thought before we will move to testing of already prepared project.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I really appreciate it. I think we're gonna kind of wrap things up here. I have one last question for each of you that we can go around, and you can give your best answer. I know you don't know what I'm going to ask, but give your best answer. So my question for you that you can share with our audience: can you think of one really important tip that they should keep in mind when selecting a tech stack? Just if you can think of one very important tip, if you could recommend. So I'll give you guys a second to think about that. And whoever would like to go first, they can raise their hand. Just one tip.
Yeah, I can go first. So the most important tip that I have for everyone is go with what you know. Go with what you know best. And like there are always better technologies out there. They're like 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line. No matter what technology stack you choose, that technology stack could be obsolete. So I always, my biggest recommendation to everyone is go with what you know versus what looks hot on the market.
Awesome, I love that. Who would like?
From my end, I'll say always look at the big picture. Don't just go with the written requirements. Ask hundreds of questions from the concerned people. Make sure that you have all the answers and then come up with the right tech stack.
Great. I love it. That's excellent. Timothy?
Yeah, I got something like Meenakshi said, like if you don't feel like you know any of the tech stacks and you're a manager, ask somebody who's built the solutions in different tech stacks and can compare and say something about real life experience working in different options.
Great. So getting feedback from people who are deep experts in the areas is really important. Sergey, did you want to add anything here?
Yeah, maybe I do not have maybe one particular tip, but I agree with all persons who previously mentioned this, that we should definitely combine all aspects. For example, budget, audience, targeting audience for your future project, and many other aspects. Only after comparing all of them, after deep discussion of them, you can select a really appropriate tech stack. It should be definitely well thought out before starting implementing.
All right. Well, hey, this is I want to thank everybody for joining us today and giving some really good thoughts and opinions on selecting a tech stack. It's a huge decision for anyone who's building a product. And this team has faced a lot of those decisions. So they think about this question over and over again. We hope some of the tips in here are useful for you and help you think about it. You can always learn more or come ask us questions. You can visit our website, www.wondermentapps.com. You can find us at Wonderment Apps on LinkedIn. You can also find us at Wonderment_apps on Instagram. So please feel free to come ask questions, engage with us. And we'd love to help you if anything comes up. So thank you all for joining today, and it was a great roundtable. Thanks for the tech insight.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Ryan. It was a pleasure.
Thanks.